Life is an incredible archive of stories. If you do it right, or even if you do it wrong, just living long enough will supply you with a treasure trove of memorable adventures. The following memories take place over many decades, so settle in with a cold one and let me tell you a story. I'm going to start this off with a phrase I never use. When I was a younger writer. I don't use that because I'm not one of those people who looks back and says, back in the day or when I was a younger writer, things were like this. No, I don't do that. But I'll explain why later on in this podcast. When I was a younger writer, actually before I was a younger writer, I was transferring to the University of Arizona in Tucson. Well, to do that, I decided to take their charter flight out west so I could meet some people before I got there because I knew no one. Problem was I had a car. It was a brand new car. It was a 1974 Dodge Challenger that my dad apparently figured I needed because he figured I hadn't dated much and this would help. Thanks, Dad. It actually did. But I digress. So, a couple of friends of mine and I made a deal that if they drove my car out, my folks would pay all the expenses and then they could fly back home. The day comes and I get on the plane and I fly out to the University of Arizona in Tucson, and the next day they arrive with my car. And now we have a few days before classes start and they've never been to Arizona, so we decide to see what's out there. And we look in the paper and we see an ad for a person who is giving glider lessons out at the airport. And we look at each other and figure that's a great idea. I mean, it's something they wouldn't do back in New York. It's something I wouldn't do back in New York. But this was Arizona. So we figured when in Rome, or when in Arizona, go for it. So we drive out to the airport and we sign up and we pay the guy, and each one of us went up individually. I was the last person to go up. And a glider is kind of interesting because you sit in the front and the instructor sits behind you, and then you're towed up by a prop plane to about 2,500 feet, at which point the tow rope breaks off and you find yourself all alone. There's no engine, obviously, it's a glider, so the one thing you don't have to worry about is exploding if you crash. You can still crash, but you're not going to explode, so, you'll probably look pretty good. You'll be dead, but you'll look pretty good. Anyway, so we're flying around and we're doing some things, and the basic rules are you have a joystick. That's it. You move the joystick left or right, depending on which way you want to go. If you pull it back, it goes up. If you push it forward, it goes down. And that's about all there is to flying a glider. It's pretty simple stuff. I mean, it's more complicated to do a video game. So anyway, we're up there and we're kind of cruising around at 2,500 feet, and he's doing all the cruising and behind me because he has his own controls. And he says, "You want to take over?" And I said, "Sure." So he tells me the basic rules about how the stick works. And I looked at it and we flew for a few seconds and I thought, you know what? And I said it out loud. I said, if you push the stick forward and it goes down, what happens if you do this? And I jammed it forward. And we went into a dive. And here's where it gets interesting. Because the instructor didn't know me, I didn't know him. At any point, he could have taken control of the craft because he had a duplicate, as I said, he had duplicate controls, and he let me go into a dive, and we did that for about 25 seconds. 25 to 30 seconds, I'm not quite sure. I wasn't looking at my watch. But it was kind of interesting because I slowly took the stick and moved it back and leveled us off, and we were flying again. Now, as I said, at no time had he tried to take control of the craft, which brings up another problem. Maybe he had a death wish and I didn't know about it. That could have been a problem right there. But I don't think he did. So after I leveled it off, he said, "I got to tell you something." He said, I've taken up a lot of people, and most people are afraid to touch the stick, let alone do what you just did. He said, if you ever come back, we'll go up and we'll have some fun. I guess he figured my personality and the fact that I just put us into a dive meant fun. Anyway, turns out that I said, well, why don't we go up right now and we can do stuff? And he said, actually, we can't. And I said, why? And he said, because while you were doing your dive, you brought us down below 500 feet. And according to FAA regulations, we have to land. And so we did. He said, but if you ever decide to come back, let's have some fun. And unfortunately, I was never able to do that because I had this little thing called school, and it kind of took over, and I was never able to get back out there. I always wanted to, but I never was able to do it. I guess the point of the story is, well, you have to know my background, and if you've been listening to any of these other podcast episodes, you do, but I've never played life with a safety net. And I know a lot of people do. They do what's safe. They stay in the box. And if they venture outside of the box and it gets a little uncomfortable, they get back in the box. I've never been that way. I've always gone outside of the box. And if I do it all the way. I don't do things halfway. So the idea of taking the glider into a nosedive was just the way I've lived my life. Something in me told me I could pull it out, even though I'd never been in a glider before. And I did. And apparently he saw the same thing in me because he didn't try to stop me. So I guess what I'm saying is life gets complicated. Life gets uncomfortable. And it's much easier and much safer to stay in that box. But if you don't get outside of the box, you'll never know what life is. Until we meet again, take care.